So real quick, we're going to get started here, but I want to let the audience know what we're doing, other than just Q&A. I went over all this with the candidates, so they're informed. We have three parts to tonight's debate, if you will. Fox News is recording in the back, courtesy of Teddy, and CNN is there as well. So in the first part, we have three types of questions. We have what we call a stance question, which is a question that the candidates will answer that the committee that was putting together the questions, they reviewed, they surveyed the candidates' information, they surveyed the community questions that were being asked over this whole campaign trail, and they came up with what they felt were important stances or important issues that we want to know a stance that the candidates have. So we have those questions that are there that the candidates will have, each one will have an opportunity to answer those. Then what we have is a platform question. We reached out to all the candidates early on in our process, and we asked them to list what they felt were the top concerns for the city from their perspective. So from that, we derived a question specifically for each candidate based on what they said was a top platform question. And then the last question to mix things up tonight in this first round will be the candidates will have an opportunity to ask another candidate a question. So we've mixed it up a little bit, and those three will rotate through. We're going to draw a name to see who goes first, and then we will proceed left to right as we sit, and right to left as they stand up there. So it's a random start, and that's how we'll begin. Then our second stage that we're going to do is the questions that we received from the community. So we'll start with those questions, and those are questions that we received from the community. We didn't edit them other than maybe a grammatical edit to make sure we felt it read properly, but otherwise it is the question the community asked. And with that round, because one question that we received from the community was asked specifically to a candidate, we're going to start with that candidate, and then we'll proceed left to right from there. And then the last phase is basically this candidate's closing statements. And we've asked them to think about, we emailed them before tonight and asked them to think about if they were elected to the position they seek, what is their pledge to the voters and the citizens of Prescott? And they will make their 2-minute closing based on their pledge. And at that point, we will conclude. One thing I did forget in the first part, each candidate has the ability to opt in. So if one candidate gets a question, they answer it, and another candidate wants to make a comment to that question, they have the ability to opt in once per question, but all candidates could opt in on the same question, but they only get 2 opt-ins for that whole round. So it's probably clear as mud. You guys have heard it twice. Hopefully they understand it. Hopefully I understand it, and we'll get going. So Sandy, if you wouldn't mind having somebody draw who's going to kick us off, we'll get started here.
And they're bigger than mine. You're not coming true. No, I'm not, but you just have to take it.
More complicated than we thought. Phil, good. We're going to be starting with you, Phil. So
thank you very much.
Thank you for volunteering.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
So the first question we have is a stance question. Phil, you will have two minutes to answer this question. It is always gratifying to see contested races for city council and new faces. There is a lot of curiosity when candidates claim they can solve issues. There is a responsibility to represent your community. Why do you feel you are able to represent your community, and what strengths do you bring to the position?
Well, I agree with that. I think we have a broad variety of community groups that are interested in many of the important issues in the community. I've made a concerted effort over the last several years to be involved in as many of those groups as possible. Some people would say that there are liberal groups, there are conservative groups. I look at the quality of the groups and the information that may be available to me as a potential city councilman to utilize the information available from those groups to make good decisions. I've participated with the Citizens Water Advocacy Group because there's a lot of very smart people in that group that understand water. I've been to almost every airport advisory committee meeting over the last year or so I can understand the complexities of airport modernization. I've been involved with the Planning and Zoning Commission as a commissioner, looking at growth issues and listening to public input on each one of those projects. So I make a real effort to understand the community's interest, balance those with a lot of research and well-formulated decisions. I've got 35 years in senior healthcare management decisions, working in a complex regulatory environment. So I understand how to navigate complex issues and make good decisions that are in the best interest of the community.
Thank you. The next question we have is a platform question, and that platform question will be for you, Joe. Joe, understaffing of public services was one of the concerns you listed facing the city of Prescott. Can you explain your concern to the voters and explain what you wish to initiate to solve the concern?
Sure. So what we have from our the past 2 years of reports we have is that the police department, I'm going to use the police department because I'm partial to the police. My father was a police officer. They had 25,000 calls for service last fiscal year, and they have 68 police officers. Now we have new data, 24,000 calls for service for 68 people. So as we're growing, as we have more houses coming up and the Deep Well Ranch, Arizona Eco Development, we need to make sure that we have that in mind when we're looking to grow. Because in truth, Prescott is a safe place, and we want to keep it a safe place, but it takes staff to be able to do that. So what I would like to do is make sure that we have enough police officers to bring that number down from 24,000 to a little bit more reasonable number for the number of police officers we have. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. The next question we have is a candidate-to-candidate question. Alexa, you get to ask the first question of any other candidate on the stage.
My question is for Phil. And my question is, what is your stance or opinion on creating opportunities for younger people and younger professionals in Prescott?
Well, I am a strong supporter of smart economic development, and I'll define that by utilizing the tremendous resources we have as a community of our size, having 4 universities here in Prescott. We have well-educated graduates, but we need to be able to develop the types of economic opportunities so those graduates can be retained and they can contribute to the community. I'm a strong supporter of the Innovation Center proposal that Mayor Oberg initiated, and I think we're moving forward with that. We not only need to support it from a city point of view, but also bring in private investments and encourage some of the really great work that Jim Robb, our economic development manager, has been able to provide. So if we're successful in that, I think we can do it, and we'll be able to retain more young people.
Thank you, Phil. Next question is back to a stance question, and that'll be for you, Connie. Our homeless population is increasing. Every day there are folks on the corners with signs. This is an impact on our tourism and community. How do you propose we solve this problem?
Well, that's actually a great question. I did serve on the, is that too loud? The Homeless Solutions Committee when Mayor Kuykendall was in office, and it was a real eye-opening experience for me. I've said this many times in many forums. I feel like I live in ground zero. I live right downtown, and it has been alarming to me, especially since I have a comparative experience having lived downtown in the 80s, and my family has been here since 1972, so I spent a lot of time in the last many, many years in Prescott. I remember many years ago pushing my son around when I lived down here in the 80s in a baby carriage, when every single home had pride of ownership and there were families in those homes. When I came back 14 years ago, I was very, very surprised, disappointed, and I couldn't figure out what had happened to some of these beautiful little neighborhoods The homeless population going down to the square. I ceased to allow my grandchildren to walk down to the square anymore. On the Homeless Solutions Committee, at that time, Chief Reinhardt was sitting on there, and I had a stack of sex offender notices that came to me from the Department of Corrections, and I would keep them all and keep them in a file. And there were a couple of there. He said to me, "Do you see that guy right there?" And I said, "Yeah, I see him every night when I walk." I commuted for a while to Phoenix, so I would walk my dog late at night, going down to the square. I'm talking 9 o'clock. That's late for me. Because it was lit. So I had a really good, again, ground zero experience of what was going on down there. So as far as the homeless population, I think we need to get a grip on this. And I've been saying all along, I can't help but, again, connect the dots and wonder if this proliferation of the drug addiction, the drug rehab industry hasn't had, big effect on this. This has become tomorrow's homeless people, if you will, the ones that relapse out of the programs and don't leave here. So we do have a problem, and as wonderful as this city is, we all love it. I want it to be that safe place that I remembered, growing up here back in the day. So I'm going to do everything I can do to make sure that the rehab homes are held accountable, make sure they're doing their job, and support the charities, because I think they're the first avenue to keeping the homeless people off the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Our next question is a platform question. Greg, the top issue you expressed was to foster business development by eliminating obstacles for small business. What will you further explain this issue and tell the voters what you wish to accomplish in relation to this if elected into office?
Yes, good. Well, I'm definitely pro-business. I think we need to figure out ways to make it easier for our businesses to thrive and grow. Some of the things that I'm looking at is the business license to try to figure out, do we really need this? Are there other ways that we can accomplish the same goal of knowing how many businesses we do have in town? Furthermore, I would say there's a liquor tax that I'm questioning the need to do that. Could that be eliminated as well? I think in terms of customer service down at City Hall, we've got to do a better job in the building department and public works departments, among others, to make it easier for contractors and developers to get the job done down there. We need calls returned. We need more responsiveness. We need to be more accommodating. And we've got to figure out how to get to yes sooner and easier. So I believe these are all issues that can be solved, but we've got to make it easier for people to do business with City Hall so we can get stuff done in our city. I think it'll be good for our city, and we'll see our businesses thrive.
Thank you, Greg. Our next question is a candidate-to-candidate question. Jean, you may ask any other candidate a question.
I have a question for Greg. Greg, why do you insist on advertising yourself as a Republican in a city election, which by charter is to be a nonpartisan election, and our charter was approved by a majority of voters decades ago?
Yes, thank you. So in a nonpartisan election, there's two things that are different than a normal election. One is that it's an open primary, so you could have two Republicans for mayor in the primary that win out, or you could have two Democrats. And so that's one nuance, is it's an open primary. Secondly, on the ballot, you will not see Republican or Democrat listed on the ballot. Those are the only two differences. When I run a race, I'm telling you, I do not lose my party affiliation or my beliefs or my values. And so I want people to know, many times when I was trying to get signatures and talking to people around town, the first question they would ask me is, what is your party affiliation? So I felt like it was a good way to get people started in terms of how to know who I am and my beliefs and values, because that's really what's most important and helps you know how I'm going to make decisions in City Hall.
Thank you. The next question is a stance question. Steve, this question is directed to you. What is our next transformation to keep Prescott growing economically? As a leader, what do you want to see, and what policies will you introduce to enact your vision for Prescott?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And second of all, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to stand here for an hour and a half, but I'll do that. I think it's important to understand that Prescott has evolved over a period of time, over a lot of years. And the best thing we can do as a governmental body is to make it easier for people to conduct commerce in the city of Prescott. That means rules and regulations need to be looked at. Generally, bureaucrats write the rules and regulations, and sometimes they have unintended consequences to the folks out there trying to conduct business. We all out there have been in a business one way or the other throughout our lives, and we've all run into roadblocks that you seemingly don't understand what they might be. As a councilman, I would tell you that I will be that guy that will be open ear to the public out there with folks trying to conduct business, and whether you are trying to open a new business or whether you're trying to retain in an existing business, of what the city can do to help you survive the climates of a downturn in the economy or an upskill in the economy, or how to do different things. I think that's what the community is all about. We don't make jobs as a government. We create the opportunity to loosen the regulatory grip on us to be able to do the right thing for our community. So that's what I stand for. I stand for looking at the codes, reducing the regulatory obligations to folks out there, and to commence commerce. That will bring jobs by themselves.
Thank you, Steve. Next question for Phil is a platform question. Phil, you used the words modest and manageable growth as a top concern for the community. Will you tell the voters what policy you will support and help initiate to ensure Prescott has modest and manageable growth?
Well, as a commissioner for the city on planning and zoning, I've had a chance to review and look at a wide number of projects over the last couple of years. We are seeing an acceleration of major developments on the periphery of the city that would have the impact very significantly of growth, more than I think our city can absorb. About 5 to 7 years ago, the state legislature took away the cities and municipalities' ability to charge development fees for new developments, so that the city's requirement to provide public safety, police and fire protection, different utilities to those new communities was taken away. Consequently, the rest of the citizens are going to have to pay for those services to be extended. And I think that really is an unfair burden on the citizens unless that development is modest. So I'll define that. 1 to 2% per year is something we can probably absorb without a real negative impact on traffic and congestion. Now, how do we do that? We do have the ability to allocate water resources from our alternate water portfolio that can keep those developments in that modest range. I think that's essential. It's a tool we can use, and I think it's a way to keep development modest and absorbable so it doesn't have a negative impact on the community. Thank you.
When do we use the opt-in card? Can we use one on?
Whenever
Okay.
you want, you just
All right.
raise it up and.
I'm going to use mine right now because I think it's an opportunity to share with the public that, over the years we've had modest growth, and from my standpoint, we have a couple of new developments that are on the horizon. I don't look at that as a negative, and I'll share with you, doing the research with staff, and we have a great staff, that Pinion Oaks has 35 lots left. They started their development in 1995, okay? Prescott Lakes was 978 acres. They're 1/2 built out. The Ranch at Prescott started in 1994. They're 1/2 built out. Yavapai Hills started in 1975. They're 1/2 built out. The point I'm trying to make here is long-range planning is extremely important for this community. To look at what's out there in the long-range plan does not mean to say it's going to be built tomorrow. What it means to say is the City Council has already looked at what the maximum growth is going to be in the city of Prescott. We've already put that water down on paper, and these developments have grown at 1.5% to 2% over the past 45 years. I think the past councils have done a very good job.
Thank you. Steve, you have one more opt-in in these questions,
Thank you.
just as a reminder. The next question is a candidate to candidate. Joe, you may ask any other candidate a question.
So I wanted to ask Phil. At
Sort of
one of
target
our,
on my back.
so Phil, I wanted to ask, at one of our other forums that we had, you talked about Prescott Valley being the bedroom community to Prescott. Why do you think that they should be the bedroom community for the people that work and live in the great city of Prescott?
Well, I think it's a pretty obvious fact that Prescott Valley's been growing and building as fast as they possibly could, and they continue to do that. We in Prescott have generally a little higher property value than Prescott Valley. So when it comes to first home buyers, there are a lot more choices in Prescott Valley than choices that we have in Prescott. Although many people that I know, and I know some personally, who've started a starter home in Prescott Valley, aspire to move into Prescott just because I think our quality of life here is more desirable, my personal opinion. So I think it's a reality. And with some of these developments being focused on a little lower price point, we might be able to see more of that for Prescott in general.
Thank you. Our next question is a stance question for Alexa. Alexa, it has been voiced that the city has too many bosses, namely the council. How do you propose to eliminate the perceived council involvement in the city staff operations and micromanagement of the staff?
That's a really great question. According to our charter, we are a city manager form of government, which means that the city manager is the one who is working the ins and outs daily down at City Hall. All staff report to him other than the city clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager who report to the council. So I think it's important to remember that when you're going in as a council member, that this is not intended to be a full-time job. We should let Michael Lamar work his magic. I think he is a jewel in this community, and I would like to see him have a little bit more free range to take Prescott and the vision that he has for it. And so I think it just will require our elected council members up here to go in with that knowledge that the city manager is the one who is working day to day, and we are there to guide him, to provide him with policy, to provide him with vision and direction, and that we should not be in the weeds of the day-to-day operations of the city.
Thank you very much. The next question is a platform question, and that'll be for you, Connie. Connie, one of the concerns that you listed was lack of code enforcement.
Correct.
Can you explain your concern to the voters and explain what you wish to initiate to solve your concern and benefit to the community?
Well, again, back on what Alexa said, according to our charter, the city council and the city manager do have a duty to basically enact our ordinances and enforce our ordinances. One of my complaints downtown, again, back on the deterioration of some of these important structures in some of the neighborhoods, is basically the lack of code enforcement. We actually have a blight ordinance in this city. You'd never know it in some areas. I think it goes beyond weeds. I think many of these homes have just been allowed to deteriorate, and it's what happens when you do that in a neighborhood? It's like a cancer on a neighborhood, and I've said this several times. You get 2 or 3 homes that have, literally been neglected. All of a sudden, they become rentals, and then all of a sudden, there's people in there because it's very inexpensive. But what about the rest of the taxpayers that have pride of ownership? This is their largest investment. They want to live in a safe community, and they want to take care of their properties, and it would be very nice if the neighbors would also take care of those. Those are the promises, in my mind, through the ordinances that the city makes to the taxpayer and the homeowner. So yes, I do believe that we need some code enforcement, and I think we need to go beyond weeds. I've had a couple of conversations with our current city, the code enforcement officer, and I remember him saying to me one time, and I'm quoting him, well, that man can't afford to fix up his house. And my response was, but that's on you. These ordinances should have been enforced 45 years ago. How do we get to this point where, yes, that's right, now this man has a home that needs $100,000 worth of repairs. It's a danger to him and the neighborhood. Where do we go from there? So I think we need to be diligent. Again, these are promises that the city makes through the ordinances to take care of the taxpayers and the homeowners.
Thank you, Connie. Phil, you'd like to opt in?
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to Connie's comments. Connie and I both serve on the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee on Sober Living Rehab Homes. I'm the co-chairman there. And we've been able to see the proliferation of those homes dramatically be reduced from somewhere close to 200 down in the 40 to 50 range. However, that ordinance has been in effect for nearly a year. Those 42 homes, only 12 of the 42 have actually completed all of their certifications and been inspected. I would not like to see regrowth in those areas because we don't have sufficient code enforcement to make sure that those homes are meeting their standards. I talked to Mike Fleming, our individual one code enforcement officer, about other issues, and he said, I'll look at a complaint on a city street, inspect that, and then drive by 2 or 3 other homes on the same street and not even stop, because all I can do is respond to complaints. We should not be passing ordinances unless we also pass the ability to enforce them. So I would support an additional code enforcement officer so we can keep our regulations appropriate and our neighborhoods well managed. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Phil, you have one remaining opt-in. Connie, would you like to opt in?
May I
Yes.
respond? I'd like to just bring that
Oh, wait,
further.
no.
Oh, not allowed?
Can't re-opt.
But I
I'm
started
sorry,
the
no,
question.
you started the
Okay.
question. My apologies.
Darn.
Sorry. Otherwise, we could be here a while. We'd like to do it, but.
Yeah.
No re-opting.
The next question is a candidate-to-candidate question. Greg, you may ask a question to any other candidate on the stage.
Okay, I'd like to ask Ms. Wilcox. Before the passage of Prop 443, we were spending about $6 to $7 million towards the unfunded liability from the general fund. Now, with the passage of Prop 443, which you and I both supported, we have a way to pay for the unfunded liability. I'm curious, what would you like to see happen with the money that had been allocated towards paying the unfunded liability from the general fund?
I would like to see the council, year by year, take a look at how much we can afford to pay in advance and what our other needs are so that we can balance our needs as we go along. We've talked about ramping up our economic development program. That's going to take some money. We just mentioned, Phil just mentioned, we need another code enforcement officer. There are many things in the city that we need that we have had to cut because of loss of revenues in the past few years. I would like to restore some of those things, but most importantly, it's something that we have to look at year by year. And if we do have the ability to set aside extra money, I think we should set it aside in a restricted account in the city and only pay as much of the PSPRS obligation as the PSPRS board tells us we must pay each year. Otherwise, we are going to watch it go poof. So let's hold on to it until we get the system fixed and restructured and working for the benefit of the real people who need it, the police and firemen.
Thank you. Gene, we're right back at you with a stance question. At least 1/3 of the city council have radio shows. It has been voiced that it is inappropriate to air city discussions and issues that can cause or create false facts, fake news, and not sharing the rest of the story. If elected mayor and as the leader of the city council, what is your position regarding radio shows? Should the council representatives be allowed to air city business on radio programs?
I think it's up to the individual council member and their sense of ethics and responsibility to the community to avoid fake news. And if there are discussions of city issues, give people an opportunity to weigh in on those. But be very careful about sticking to the facts and using information that staff has supplied, or if they want to criticize it, I think it's up to them. I don't have an objection to people having radio shows. I think it's actually an opportunity for information to get out to people. But the danger is treading too carelessly and creating false impressions. So it's a matter of individual responsibility to me. And if I see that happening as mayor, I would sit down with that radio show personality and have a heart-to-heart discussion about the misimpressions that are being given.
Thank you. Steve, the next question is for you. It's a platform question. Steve, you listed airport as a top concern facing the city of Prescott. Can you explain your concern to the voters and explain what you wish to initiate to solve your concern?
Well, I look at the airport as a tool. I look at it as commerce. I look at it as employing jobs. I look at it for using it as a many means of transportation. Most people would know that sits in this room that from time to time you get stuck on I-17 and you have no way out. Here in this community, as it continues to grow, here in Yavapai County, the Quad City area, we have the ability and the opportunity to make this airport something more than it is today. And the folks that I've visited with in the past, they've talked about commuter service that's on time. I have flown this airline before and got stuck in San Diego several times. That's not the kind of commerce we need. We need somebody that's a viable airline that comes in. If Kalispell, Montana can have an airline terminal with 3 major airlines coming in, City of Prescott can as well. An airport authority is a good way to go. People often have said City of Prescott can't work with the town of Prescott Valley or with the county or anybody else, and I felt to differ with them. We did that with the communications center, with our police and fire, public safety, and we came together as a community to bring in top professionals to run that communication center. And I think we need to have a viable airport to bring in commerce, to bring in jobs. We in the city of Prescott lost several opportunities. One, the Cardinals, to be able to have their operations here in Prescott because we had no way to get them out of here as far as air traffic. We also lost the opportunity to have a minor league baseball team here in Prescott because we had zero way to get them in and out of Prescott. That was logistics of flying in and out. So when you start talking about commerce, bringing people here and moving people, we're living in that century where we need to have more opportunities than just getting in a 4-wheel vehicle and getting stuck on I-17.
The next question is for you, Phil, and it is a candidate-to-candidate question. So you now may ask any other candidate a question.
All right, you guys, are you ready? My question is for Alexa. Alexa, I've known you to be a very bright and capable young lady, and happy birthday, by the way. I understand you're now 20. But there's concern that the amount of experience that you could bring to the council is particularly limited. One of my many or several major heroes is Margaret Thatcher. She said that the facts of life are conservative. And what that means is over the course of a professional career, life experience, raising families, etc., it changes your perspective on government. So can you address that fact and how you would counteract your position?
That's not a question I haven't gotten before, so it's not out of the blue. First and foremost, my time in Prescott. I grew up here. I've literally been here for 20 years now. I understand our culture. I understand our values. I understand the aspects of this community that we want to preserve. I'm deeply rooted in this community, and I have no plans of leaving. Secondly, my first introduction into local politics was I was asked to serve on a board that is currently creating the memorial for the 19 Granite Mountain Hotshots that will be located on our courthouse plaza. And so that has required a lot of interaction between our local governments here, the city and the county. And we also are dealing with budgeting issues, reaching out to the public to get their perception on what a memorial should look like. Also, I'm a new perspective. We've never had someone as young as I am on our council, someone who is truly invested in this community, who plans to live here for the rest of her life. And so I think that is totally invaluable to have on our council. And lastly, my intentions. I am doing this with the purest of intentions because I want to, because I love this community, and this is not a stepping stone for me or something to add to my resume. I'm doing this for the love of Prescott.
Thank you. The next question is a stance question for Joe. More than 50% of Prescott is considered retired. What is your plan to continue livability and design a movement to evolve and keep the heartbeat of Prescott going?
That's a really good question. So, we call ourselves more and more a retirement community, but we're so much more than a retirement community, right? So, when it comes to economic development, and right now, continue being a retirement community is not sustainable. We can't keep working on straight residential growth and not focus on any sort of commercial growth. It's in the past councils have even passed the annexation policy to further that because they realize that we can't just survive off that growth. So right now, our property tax is incredibly low. We have probably one of the lowest property taxes in the state. And our property taxes on any even of the new constructions we get can't pay for the infrastructure, when pipes go bad, when we have to replace piping, when the roads need to be repaired. Those things we can't just do that off of our straight property tax. So we rely on the money we get from our sales taxes. And we have the streets tax, we have PSPRS tax now. Those are incredibly important for the longevity of Prescott. So keeping the heartbeat of the city of Prescott would definitely be diversifying, moving away from this straight residential growth and adding in commercial, keeping the commercial growth, and making sure we have it for the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Alexa, the next question is a platform question. Alexa, a top concern you listed facing the city of Prescott was economic development, specifically on attracting and retaining younger people in the area. What policy or policies would you propose within the first 90 days in office to foster this commitment?
In my previous statement, I alluded I'm a Prescott native, and so when I was getting ready to graduate high school, there's very much a sentiment from our local grads here in the area that they are unwelcomed here, that there's not opportunities for them to live here, to raise their family here. There's not a plethora of high-paying jobs that they're interested in, and so they leave. They leave and they don't come back typically until maybe after they have retired. And so I think moving forward as a city, that is something that needs to be on our radar all the time. And so within the first 90 days, I would like to get that innovation center going. I would also like to keep Jim Robb on board. I think he's done a lot of really great work with the tech industry and really harnessing the power of our local universities and educational institutions in the area. And also creating a really collaborative relationship with our local schools, I think is also important. Strong schools build strong communities, and I live and breathe by that saying. And so those are just some of the things I would look at proposing in the first 90 days if I am elected, because really the young professionals in this area are really what keeps this city thriving and keeps the heartbeat going.
Thank you. Connie, the next question is a candidate-to-candidate question. So you may ask any other candidate a question.
Let me put on my glasses. Actually have I want to tap into the vast knowledge of Steve Blair for being on the council for 16 years. One of the questions I've had over and over again, so Steve, this is for you. How much of the decision-making of the council relies on staff? So, for example, if an issue comes up, does the council, many members of the council feel impelled to go out and actually look at the problems and survey it and come up with their own decision, or do they rely very heavily on staff?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of council person you are. From my standpoint, I've been on the back of Mike Fann's screed machine out in the middle of the road to understand what kind of product they're putting down. I think it's behoove the council person to ask the questions, not only of staff, but also go out and research the comments that they're giving to you. I think being here for as long as I have, it gives me a strong ability to be able to ask those questions. Our city manager is the one I go to, first of all, because he's the guy we hire, and I direct him, like I have the information here on my sheet today, asking him if his staff would please provide me with the material on developments within the community, and also with the amount of population we have based upon the 2002 census, 2005 census. If I didn't have the drive to go out and ask that question, it may have not have been brought forward. So I think you have to have the ability to want to go out and find out what's right for the community and not rely on staff. Because remember, not only staff, some of them are not wedded to the community because they move in for a job and they move out. The people that are on council hopefully are wedded to the community and have more of a drive to do the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, the next question is a stance question. Whether your emphasis is on safe yield or economic development, the city of Prescott at some point will need additional water for the needs of the community. Every study agrees conservation efforts alone will not solve the problem. What specific policy would you enact to ensure we have the water the community needs moving into the future?
Well, good question. Before I start with that, I want to just say thank you so much for this huge crowd. This is the largest Fourm crowd we've had, and thanks to Sandy and her team. What a great job for advertising and getting everyone here, and thanks for being here and listening. In terms of water, it's obviously something that's a hot button issue. I think that we do need to look at conservation. There's a lot more that we can do with conservation to make sure that we stretch the water that we have currently. Lots has already been done, but I think there's a lot more that we can do. In terms of safe yield, which I know is upon us at 2025, I know we have the Big Chino Water Ranch. Right now, we're waiting on these studies that are happening right now with SRP, and I'm hoping that in 2018 we can get those results to see the effects on the Verde River. But we've got to keep moving down the road with the Big Chino Water Ranch to figure out how to get that online, how to pay for it. There's a lot more questions than answers right now, but I'd be in favor of pursuing that step by step and making sure that we make progress to figure out how to develop that water out of the Big Chino.
Thank you. Jean, you may opt in.
Thank you, Brad. I disagree that we need to be on a fast-moving track to develop the Big Chino. Recent statistics have shown that our conservation measures are working in Prescott. People are using fewer gallons per day in their homes. I agree with Greg, we can get a lot more aggressive with conservation, but I don't think it's inevitable that we have to build the Big Chino pipeline. I think there are other alternatives that we need to study, one of which is buying up water rights that are closer in the Little Chino water basin from agricultural land users who no longer need their wells. No one has ever studied that, and it may be actually more cost effective to buy up those groundwater rights than it would be to spend $400 million on a pipeline that we really wouldn't need were it not for all the big new developments that are happening north of Prescott.
The next question is a platform question for you, Gene. One of your top concerns is the residential and commercial growth north of the Dells. In a recent blog dated October 4th, 2017, you outwardly denounced the developers and/or landowners north of the Dells, referencing Mike Phan as the master of roads, Sir Stuart and his henchman Giese, and the James dynasty, Sir James the Elder, all as rulers, all increasing their wealth and kingdom, and thinking the people and the staff are unwise. If elected mayor, how will you approach working with these developers that you have called out as irresponsible, heedless, and greedy? And do you feel this is a fair representation of your leadership style?
The blog was a parody on the Game of Thrones, and I think most young people are familiar with that, and I know that Mike Phan is too. He even laughed about the blog I wrote. I did receive an email from Ron James, and he wanted to sit down and talk, so my husband and I went out to lunch with him, and we talked it through. And I think at the end of it, we came to an amicable understanding that, yes, there is a game played in the development strategy where a developer buys or has large open tracts of land, comes into the decision makers, the city council, with a pretty picture, a master plan of what is to be, then asking for twice as much as they think they're going to get, and they get approval for annexation, for preliminary plats, they sell it off to parcels to different developers, and then those developers come back later on and say, I can't do it that way, we have to eliminate the commercial. And that's one point that really concerns me. If we don't have a balance of types of uses in our community and it all becomes residential, we are going to become the bedroom community of Prescott Valley. No offense, Brad, I know you're Mr. PV. But we need a balance here because commercial development is so important to our tax base, our ability to provide city services. So in short, the answer to your question is I would go to those individuals. I have talked to Mike Phan. I have talked to Ron James. I haven't yet talked to Stuart Swanson. He's a long-distance call across the ocean. But it is my intent to do so after this election in 3 weeks.
Thank you very much. And no offense taken.
Pardon?
No offense taken.
Okay.
Greg, you wanted to opt in?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of development and the process that these people go through when they come to the city, there's a great process that's in place that includes transparency and public input. I do not see this as a game. When developers come to the city, they legitimately have worked very hard on their development and their master plan. They come to the city asking for approval and input. It is not a game. It is absolutely hard work on the backs of the developers trying to do the best that they can to comply with city land development code. And I see that happening with these developers that are coming to the city right now. And I would never belittle anyone coming to the city. I think we need to be respectful on both sides and listen to each other and come to solutions.
Thank you, Greg. Steve, your final opt-in.
Very quickly, I've seen Prescott evolve a lot in the 6 years that I've been here. And I just want to share again, because I asked staff, Connie, to bring me this information. And Prescott Lakes was a huge conversation piece when it first came aboard. Everybody didn't like it. They hated it. They didn't want it to be there. And now it's a fabric of our community and quite a very good development. That development has gone through 12 different plat changes based upon the economy. Whether it's Astoria with all the small houses that are on top of the hill once being tabbed for a convention center, a developer, whether you like it or not, is a businessman. And they change their plans based upon the environment of what sells. Prescott Lakes originally was platted and approved by the City Council for 2,718 lots. At this point today, with new plat changes, they're at 1,713. 7,000 less building sites because the properties they were selling were bigger houses and not on smaller lots. So I think there needs to be some scrutiny given to the council to look at the project and to oversee the balance of why things change within a community based upon who's moved here, what Prescott has to offer, and what we need to do to have a whole community. And I think we've done that at Prescott Lakes. I think we've done that with a lot of our developments. And I think we should be very sensitive to looking at each one of those changes and not just think as it of a cash cow. It is our community.
Thank you, Steve. Connie, you have an opt-in?
Yeah, you know, this is a subject I know very well, having basically had a business in the development industry for 35 years. People have to understand, and I've said this on my blog as well many times, the building industry is probably one of the most heavily regulated industries in the entire country. When you come here to Prescott and you decide you want to build, they run you through the ringer. And I'm not telling you that it's a bad thing. There's a lot of good things that come out of that. But at the end of the day, Ron James and Ron James' family are not breaking any laws. They're going to do everything they can do to comply with this because they don't have a choice. We can look at them and we can make suggestions to them, but the bottom line is this is their land, this is still a free country. So long as they can prove the water, they abide by our ordinances, the building, all of the building ordinances, the building laws, the EPA, the energy codes. You have no idea what it takes to get a pad or planned area development off the ground. And I'm pretty sure that this development has been in the works for many, many years. So we cannot deny this man his rights so long as he is complying with all of those regulations.
All right, the final question of this round one is a candidate to candidate. Steve, you may ask any other candidate a question.
Do I get to hear the question first? Can I hear the question first? I want to know who I want to pick on.
You get to ask the question to any other candidate.
Oh, that's good.
So you could make it, you get to choose.
You know, there's so many questions I'd like to ask folks. The question I would like to ask Alexa is that being on council and understanding she was born and raised here and so was I. And you have to start somewhere, and certainly being elected the first time is getting a start. And prior to being on council, being elected the first time, I served 4 years on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and 4 years on the Planning Commission. Do you not believe there's some inherent knowledge to be had to doing community service of some form or another before you run for city council?
Absolutely, I do. And, you know, I think that's a really interesting question, actually. There is. And I have been involved in local politics, whether it's not directly with the city, it's with our schools, you know, serving on this hotshot committee board. And regardless of the outcome, if I am elected, you can absolutely believe it that I will be diving in day one, learning everything I can. The truth of the matter is I'm 20, and I don't have the life experience of someone up here, and I'm not denying that I have that. You know, I'm willing to learn. I have learned throughout this process about the issues. I've listened to people. I've listened to their concerns and evaluated those into my opinions. And so there is, you know, some community service that needs to happen, but I've been serving on this hotshot board. I raised a guide dog for the blind for 1.5 years and was an ambassador for that program and taught the public how to behave around service dogs. So while I haven't directly been involved with the city, I have been serving this community, and I plan to. And if I don't get elected, I just hope people know that there are young people in this community that are passionate about Prescott and want to get involved.
Thank you both, and thank you all. That concludes round one. So round two, we're going to move into the questions that we received from the community directly. So in this one, because we had a question that was emailed in from the community specifically to Greg, we're going to start with you on this and have you do that question, and then we'll go left or right. So we'll come over to Gene second. So Greg, this question was directed towards you. As someone who espouses the virtues of small-town Prescott, there is a perception that the majority of your campaign contributions are coming from donors, such as developers who would benefit from massive growth. Do you feel that this is hypocritical to take donations from a group that benefits from such growth?
Yes, I have over 170 different donors. I think it's a very balanced and diverse group of people that have chosen to follow and support me and give money. Of that 170, about 40% are retirees. There's about 35% that are small business owners, and about 11% are in that category of developers. I do not have any favors that I owe any developer in this town. My belief is, as a developer, small business owner, or retiree, when you're looking at candidates, you're going to choose to support a candidate that most resonates with you and your values and your beliefs. And I believe that is what has happened. And some of them are developers, but a small portion of them are. But I'm telling you today, there is no basis for me to have any favors that I owe any one developer or anybody on my donor list. And so I think it's a very balanced and diverse list. I'm very grateful for people who have been donating without even being solicited. And so I'm very grateful for my donors, and I do not feel like I'm beholden to any of them.
Thank you. Next question is for you, Gene. Do you or any immediate family members have a personal vested interest, financial, business, or otherwise, with the development of the Deep Well Ranch project, and if so, to what degree?
No.
It was random.
I will say that my husband has known Ron James for a very long time. His kids have grown up with my husband's kids, I respect him, my husband respects him, but it doesn't mean I'm beholden to him either. I judge proposals based on their merits, not who's standing before me.
Great, thank you. Steve, the next question is for you. Reliable cell phone service today is a necessity, not a luxury, for both the public to report emergencies and backup communications for first responders. Recently, a proposal was submitted to enhance the cell phone service to the west side of Prescott, specifically the Copper Basin area. The current city council members voted against an enhancement to add a cell phone tower next to the city-owned water tank. No cost to the city would occur, and it was proposed as a revenue-generating upgrade to cell service. What is your view on this issue?
That's pretty simple. From my standpoint, again, based upon the knowledge that I didn't have of the cell site and the knowledge that staff brought forward to us about the current water tank, it precluded us from putting a cell tower on that facility. And the property was purchased by the city of Prescott solely for a water tank. As a member, for full disclosure, of Yavapai County Mounted Sheriff's Posse, I have entered into dialogue with the cell phone company to look at the Sheriff's Posse property, to look at installing a cell phone tower there to give that connected service. Not always is it the easy way is the right way. Sometimes we have to work at it a little bit. And what I did is went out far beyond and asked what other spots can be used with the development company that wanted to put it in, which was Verizon. And I got a response from them, and at this point in time, we're negotiating with Yavapai County Sheriff's Posse to put in a cell tower on the west side of town.
Thank you. Phil, even with the so-called 100-year proof of water supply required to develop land in Arizona, how can we be assured it will be accurate for Prescott's Deep Well Ranch project and the Granite Dells project?
Well, the fact is that it can't be assured. We've had some modeling studies done on the capacity of the Big Chino Water Ranch. Those models indicate that there's substantial resources there. So like a lot of long-term expensive projects of this nature, we can study it as best we can and then make the best decision that we can. I also agree with Gene and one of the other candidates here regarding the ability of us to do a much more robust effort in water conservation, rainwater harvesting. There's a lot we can do today. Whether we're ever going to get to the point where we can afford a 150 or 200 or $300 million pipeline is such a huge project that has so many regulatory issues, so many potentials for legal injunctions based on environmental systems or objections. It's such a long-term possibility, and I think a rather small possibility to actually get the thing built. So we have to focus on what we can do today. If we do a better job, we can assure many years of continued water supply, along with making sure our growth is modest and absorbable. A lot of people don't even know the city put in an incentive program for rainwater harvesting almost 10 years ago. Over that period of time, we've had 52 people apply for this. And they said, well, we're not getting a really good response, let's double the incentive. Well, we went from 3 people year before last to 7. Most people don't even know this thing exists. So we can do a lot with better communication, better management, and I think we would have a better future in the short and the medium term than focusing too much on an extremely unlikely and expensive pipeline.
Thank you. I think we know where the community's interest is. Joe, this question is for you. In your opinion, overall, is the proposed Deep Well Ranch development advantageous to Prescott or disadvantageous?
As it's planned right now, my biggest worry with the Deep Well Ranch project is the flexibility in its land use. Only because the commercial property is so important for the city of Prescott. It keeps our property taxes low, and it gives us a place to shop. So the Deep Well Ranch development is not a bad thing by itself. In fact, some of the pictures that they've shown so far were, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Austin, Texas. It's called the Domain. Beautiful shopping area. And they probably bring in quite a bit of money from it for the municipality, for Austin. So the Deep Well Ranch is not inherently bad. Some of the flexibility that they're asking for can really hurt the city of Prescott, especially the residential growth directly near the airport. And the reason why that's so important is because every once in a while, and it's really unfortunate, sometimes planes go down towards the ends of the runway. And what they have right now, or have proposed right now at the ends of the runway, are some trail systems, but civic as well. And that civic that could be a police station, that could be a fire station. Embry-Riddle is one of our most important partners for the city of Prescott. If something happens, something terrible, and I don't want to say that it will, but it has happened in the past. If something does happen, we could lose a very important partner for the city. So, thanks.
Thank you very much. Alexa, the next question is for you. As our council representative, you would be in a position of power to support spending money. What skills and experience do you have that will allow you to assess the item or items that are presented to council to ensure that those items are equitable and fair to everyone? For example, that the taxpayers do not shoulder the majority of the spending from the general fund.
First and foremost, common sense, I think, is important when making those types of decisions. I would rely on staff for accurate numbers. I would reach out to the community to ask them what they think about the proposed spending. We work for the taxpayers, not the other way around. I don't have any very specific experience in terms of working with budgets, but it's something that I am learning about, something that I will be relying on the staff to help me with, and I'm learning about it, and so that would be my approach to that, is I would first and foremost be reaching out to the public to see what their perception is about items that council is looking at to spend on, because they should always be beneficial for the community.
Thank you very much. Connie, the last question in this round is for you. If during the course of the city's fiscal year, it was apparent that revenue receipts were above budgeted projections, and you had an additional $2 million to spend, would you spend it towards open space, and why, or why not?
No, I would not. I would actually spend it for a code enforcement officer or another policeman. You know, open space is a wonderful thing. I love it too. I love nature. I love going out in it. But those are things that very, very wealthy communities get to buy in these days. We still haven't completely recovered from the recession. So at this time right now, no, that would be kind of low on my priority list. Although I do, see the need, especially if parts of the Granite Dells were to come up, I would say I would have to look at that. But no, I think right now we have more important needs. Safety is a big concern of ours. Fire, of course, my son's a fireman. Those are things we cannot do without. So I think I would enhance those areas first today, at this time.
Great, thank you. All right, we are off to our final round. Steve Blair, you will be kicking us off in this round. So this is the candidates' closing statements. This is their final comment for the evening. There will be no opt-ins for this as well. And the question is centered around, if you're elected to the position you're seeking, what is your pledge to the citizens of Prescott?
To continue on. From my standpoint, I understand there's people that don't like some of the things that I do or say. I appreciate that. Other people like what I do and say. But one thing you do know is you know who I am. I don't hide anything. I stand behind what I say. I look at the values to this community as somebody that was born and raised here, and somebody that's raised a family here, has been a Boy Scout leader, has been a Little League coach, a Babe Ruth coach, American Legion coach, on Sun Up Rotary, on Kiwanis. I continue to be part of the community, listen to people, and do the right thing for the majority of the people that occupy this community.
Thank you very much. Phil, what is your pledge?
Well, I pledge that I will be the voice for the taxpayer. I am a conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe in low taxes, low regulation, individual responsibility. I honor private property rights. But my focus will always be the algorithm that I use for making decisions. First, does this need to be done? Second, does it need to be done now? How is it going to be paid for? And will it lead to bigger government or more regulation? So I ask those questions before I would consider anything. As you well know, I did not support the 443 proposition, primarily because I didn't think the language was strict enough, and I thought the timing was bad because our representatives had made a diligent attempt to try to reform the system at the legislative level in Phoenix. However, that decision has been made. I honor the decision of the taxpayers, and I will pledge to make sure those tax dollars are used the way they're intended. They're not going to be shifted to use other services or expand services. We're going to use those dollars to pay down this debt, get out from under this huge liability burden, and then we might have somewhere down the road a little more flexibility for some of these additional issues. So you can rely on me for that. You can rely on me for well-researched, thoughtful, balanced decisions that balance private property rights with the best interests of the community, and to make sure that our community stays the unique place it is. I'll honor the Western culture. I'll make sure that we don't grow too fast, and we don't support developments that impact our quality of life. So those are things that you can rely on me for. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Joe, your pledge.
My pledge to the city of Prescott, if I'm so lucky to be elected, is this. I'm a numbers guy. I worked in banking for years. I balanced a day-to-day budget of over $1 million, day to day. I've worked with a very diverse group of people with the International Olympic Committee on the golf course. There were 12 different nationalities of people that each spoke different languages. And to this day, the golf course is one of the only Olympic venues that's still open to the public and still operating. We've worked through it. We've seen water issues. I've seen water issues. Because I'm a numbers guy, we have a very important commitment to keep our promise for PSPRS. It's passed, and that was the very first step. But we have to keep pressure on the state to continue making sure that this is solved at the state level. The other thing, I'm passionate about the city of Prescott. And I will probably live here, if I live 40 to 50 more years, pizza willing. It's the effect of the policies that we have and we enact today will shape what Prescott looks like into the future for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm very thoughtful about it. I listen to all of you. I work very well with all of you. So please, tell me what you think is important and vote for me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. Alexa.
I pledge to be an inclusive member of council. I will listen to any and all ideas, opinions, and perspectives. I pledge to have an open door and open communication with all constituents. I pledge to be transparent and explanatory in my actions on council. I pledge to bring integrity, respect, and open-mindedness to the dais. I pledge to work hard and be informed on all decisions I make on council. I pledge to work hard only for the interests of the citizens of Prescott and will put my constituents before myself. I pledge to be collaborative with other council members, with other local interests, and with the citizens themselves. And most importantly, I pledge to continue to bring meaning to our motto, everybody's hometown. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie, your pledge.
My pledge. I pledge to preserve and enhance our valuable history down here in the downtown historic areas. I want to promote our businesses, understanding how important our economic development is, our economic viability. This is so important to keep our history and keep it intact and keep it preserved and renovated. I served on the Prescott Economic Advisory Committee for a year, and I was privy to see a lot of numbers that I hadn't been privy to see before. As a 35-year business owner, I've started 4 businesses. I've negotiated contracts. The bulk of my work have been for every attorney in this state. Working with attorneys is not easy. I have got to keep supporting documents. I've got to track everything. I've got to be able to discern the fact from the fiction. These are things I have done, and I've done it well. But I'm also a mother. I'm a grandmother. My family's here. We live downtown. We love this area. And as I said before, I've been disappointed in the direction it had been going. Now, I've seen a lot of changes in the area in the last year or so with people taking the risk, just like I have, to come down here and put their money where their mouth is. We all want to enjoy this history. We want to preserve it, but we want to raise our families here. I have 17 nieces and nephews, and out of the 17, 9 were raised here. They've all left. They can't get jobs. They're educated people with master's degrees. So that's another area of my concern. I'd like to be able to track some of the millennials, just like Alexa, to come back down here. I understand we don't have the businesses, but as an entrepreneur that has started 4 businesses in my lifetime, that is the way to make money, and I would like to actually be on a council that promotes that as well. So I've got my work cut out for me, but again, I'm very invested in this city, not only financially, but my heart with my family being here and my grandkids, and I would like to be able to have them come here and take over for what I've started. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Greg, your pledge to the voters.
From the very beginning of my campaign, our slogan has been to preserve the best and enhance the rest. And I want to do just that. That would be my first pledge to you, that we will try to preserve the historic charm and character of our city, those basic tenets and values that we all know and love that make our city great. My second pledge to you involves restoring public trust. I believe it's important that you, the voter, trust City Hall. We've got to keep our promises. This can be done with the Prop 443 monies to make sure those monies go to the unfunded liability. Furthermore, I will work very hard for you, the taxpayer, to find every dollar in the general fund to pay off the unfunded liability. I know that it's your money, and I will work hard to spend it wisely. My next pledge would be regarding customer service. We have got to take care of our citizens of Prescott at City Hall. Reagan said it best, government works for us, not the other way around. I will work hard to make sure that we take care of our citizens. I will make sure that we're accommodating, that we can get to yes, and make sure that we're taking care of our business community to make things easier. My next pledge is in regard to growth. I pledge to you that I will objectively look at every development that comes to City Hall. We will use the processes in place. There will be transparency. There will be public input. And I want what is best for Prescott. I'm not beholden to any developer. So I think it's important that we have smart growth. We have to get ahead of it. Growth is going to happen. It's a market phenomenon, but we've got to make sure we're planning ahead of it to get what we want out of these developments. And finally, I will use strong leadership to lead our city. I believe, based on the experience that I have at camp as well as down at the school board, that I have proven leadership. Leadership that says I can bring people together, find common ground, build consensus, and get to strategies and goals and a common goal so that we can get things done. And that's the most important reason why I'm the best qualified to be your next mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Jean, our final candidate and our final pledge tonight.
Thank you. My pledge to you is to be a mayor for all people in Prescott, regardless of your party affiliation, your conservative or liberal values, whichever end of the spectrum you may fall. To listen, to give people an opportunity to speak to the council individually at council meetings, and also to facilitate a council that will work together under the open meeting law, but understand each other and understand that we will disagree, but be able to speak with each other and work towards solutions together instead of splitting votes and being on two sides of a battlefield. I will devote my full-time attention and energy to the business of Prescott. I think it's important to understand that a mayor is not someone who just goes in 40 hours a week and sits at a desk. The mayor is someone who needs to be out in the community, the surrounding communities, the state, working with our state legislators, being in constant contact and communication with those in the outside world. I pledge to be an ambassador that Prescott will be proud to have as mayor, and to speak well always of this community, which I love very much. I will not micromanage. I think we have an excellent city manager, and city manager, council form of government is the government that I come to understand and respect. I will be the person who facilitates the making of policy to make sure that we have good information upon which we can make good policy. So with my experience as an attorney, reading contracts, negotiating deals, digging for evidence, I know that I can pull out that information to make sure that the council has the right information to make good decisions. And that's my pledge.
Thank you, Jean, for that. And I want to say thank you to each candidate up there. Thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you for the long journey that we all know you've been on. We have a few more weeks left, so I wish you all well. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming out and making this possible, along with our sponsors, YCCA, Prescott Chamber, and Central Arizona Partnership. But most importantly, thank you guys.
Thank you all.